So I guess most listeners will have heard of Lord of the Flies, or even have read it, or basically have been forced to read it while they were in school. For those who don't know, it's a story of kids being in an air crash and then ending up on this uninhabited island. And they try to build a democracy of sorts, but it doesn't really work out. At the end of the novel, which is written by William Golding, a British author, at the end of the novel, 3 kids are dead, and the message is, look, this is just what we're like. This is just what kids are like. If you give them freedom, then they'll behave in a pretty horrible way. And that's the lesson we taught to millions and millions of kids for decades. Now, I wondered, while I was researching this book, whether it has ever happened. Because that would be interesting, wouldn't it? If we could find a real live Lord of the Flies case study, and then, see what the real life Lord of the Flies would look like. Now, I'm of course a proper researcher, so I started on Google. So just Googling like Lord of the Flies and real life or kids on an island. And the first thing you stumble upon are all these horrid reality shows, because, these people who work in reality television, they have the
beasts.
Yeah, they always come up with these horrible, crazy ideas. But then after a while, I did actually find one case that supposedly in 1965, 1966, 6 kids shipwrecked on an island and survived there for 15 months by working together. And then I wondered, maybe these kids are still alive. They would be around 70 years old right now. And the captain who rescued them, maybe he's also still alive. He's an Australian captain called Peter Warner, now 90 years old. So yeah, that's what I spent the next 5 or 6 months of my life on, tracking these people down. And I found them in Australia. So I traveled to the other side of the globe. I live in the Netherlands myself. And Peter Warner, the captain, and his best friend, Mano, who was one of the real life Lord of the Flies kids, they told me what really happened. And if it would have been, this story would be a Hollywood fictional movie, and people would say, that is so unrealistic. That would never happen, But it really happened. The real Lord of the Flies is a story of friendship, of resilience, of working together in very difficult circumstances and surviving. So yeah, it's really been the highlight of my career so far to have been able to actually track these people down.
So what actually happened when these people were on the island?
Well, it's interesting. So a couple of things. They worked together in teams of 2 to be on the lookout for ships, to tend to the garden, and to cook. Sometimes they ended up in fights, but then what they would do is that one would go to one side of the island, the other would go to the other side of the island. They would cool off a little bit, have a time out, and then come back and say sorry. That happened a couple of times during their stay there. They wanted to stay in shape, so they had their own gym with their sort of own improvised weights. Very curious. They had their own badminton court. And yeah, they made a sort of a guitar from some of the pieces of the ship that was wrecked on the island. And so they made a lot of music. And they were bored quite often, but still managed to survive. So when they were rescued after 15 months, well, rescued is maybe not even the right word, because they could have lived there for years if they would have wanted to. But when they were found by this Australian captain, they were in really good shape. Actually, one of the boys had fallen down a cliff and broken a leg, but they had managed to heal that with traditional medicine. In almost every single way, the real Lord of the Flies is the opposite of the fictional Lord of the Flies. Now, I do understand that it's only one story. It's just an anecdote. But if millions of kids have to read this fictional story, then why don't we also tell them about the one single time that we know of where it really happened? Because that's a completely different story.